Nevertheless, we have to make one guest speaker show this name. Otherwise, he's hamare very, very apne. Okay. We are thankful to you, sir, to be with us this evening. And we welcome you from the core of our hearts in today's event. We are looking forward to your insightful deliberations on today's topic, that is Renaissance and the drama. With these words, I welcome you, and we are looking forward now for your insightful deliberations on this topic. Sir, the session is now all yours.
Sir, audio.
Naresh, so you have to unmute yourself.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Das sir, for welcoming me as a guest and also as one of your own. So this kind of welcome is rare. So I'm very happy that once again I have been remembered my senior colleagues, my friends from Karim City College, and I'm here. First of all, I wish to thank the Almighty that we are in a position to be part of such event, that we are facing each other, that we are listening to each other. So we must, thank the Almighty God, Allah, that He has kept us in good condition. Otherwise, the world is really in a bad shape. So I'm very thankful to Him. And thereafter, of course, I'm thankful to Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, the head of the department English, Karim City College, and the entire department, Neha, Basu, Dasa, Saket, and all, that they thought fit to invite me to speak on this topic. Though I don't consider myself competent enough to speak on this topic, but since I have a weakness for Karim City College, whenever I receive a proposal, a request, I'm just unable to say no to it. So as soon as Dr. Yahya gave me a ring and requested me that they are going to have a series of lectures on Renaissance and the new epistemology, and he wanted me to give one lecture in that series, I immediately said yes. But at that time, I had no knowledge, no sense of the huge task that it was. Later on, I realized that perhaps I am not as qualified as my friends would have thought me for this purpose. Anyway, once again, I thank you all, and I hope that in case I fail in my duties, I don't come up to your expectation, you will just forgive me. You will accept in whatever condition I am. Coming to the today's topic, the Renaissance and the new epistemology. This is the broad topic of the lecture series, and of which I have to speak on the topic, the Renaissance drama. Of course, here it implies that English Renaissance drama, it goes without saying. But before coming to it, I would want to discuss a little bit about the main topic, the Renaissance and the new epistemology. Before I start my lecture, I once again would like to kind of apologize, seek apology for all of you that there would be some kind of repetition in my lecture, because if you have a series of lectures, different persons are speaking on the same topic, so some kind of repetitions are expected, because the lecture has not been planned by one individual or by an editor. So maybe some of the things that I'll be saying might have been said by earlier speakers also, but in order to speak on the topic that I have been given to, it is important to start from the Renaissance itself. It is the Renaissance and the new epistemology. The word Renaissance is not quite new to us. We all have been dealing with this term for years and years and years. But the term has become problematic of late, recently. The Renaissance, when we say the Renaissance, it generally means the Renaissance in Europe. And the problem starts here. We do not use any adjective, Indian Renaissance, or the European Renaissance, or the American Renaissance. We just say the Renaissance, and people believe that it is European Renaissance. Okay. So here the problem starts. The period of Renaissance is supposed to be from the 14th century to the mid of the 17th century. From the 14th to the mid of the 17th century. But when we say even the European Renaissance, can we apply this period to Italy, to Spain, to France, to Germany, and to England in the same fashion? No, we cannot. Different countries have experienced this, movement in different time, and therefore, to say that this period of the Renaissance starts from the 14th century and it covers the first half of the 17th century is a little bit problematic. But a bigger problem lies further. If you look at all the countries of Europe, then you would see that it is only Greece and Rome, that is modern Italy, had some great past. So you had great Greek civilization, Greek literature, Greek culture, and after that we had similar kind of thing in the Roman world also. So if the people of Italy or the people of Greece, they claim that something was happening in Italy and Rome which could be called the Renaissance, it is unstable. It is understandable. Sorry. It can be understood, let's say. I'm having a problem. Understandable. Okay. But you see the history of England, and you see the history of Germany, and even France, let's say. France, the condition of France is a little better, but just look at Germany and look at England. Now, did they have anything which they can revive in the 16th or 17th century? Germany, if you leave out Martin Luther and the mathematician philosopher Leibniz in the 17th century and Martin Luther in the early 16th century, then Germany has absolutely nothing which it can feel proud of. So the glory of Germany actually is the glory of the 18th century or the early 19th century. Germany absolutely had nothing in the 16th century, in the 15th century. So how can Germany claim that they are experiencing Renaissance? England was also having the same thing. You leave out some schoolmen, that is, people connected with church, and a few poets, Chaucer and his friends. What can England revive in the 16th century and 17th century? So, if England was not awake in the 4th century or 5th century BC or AD, how can England claim that it is experiencing reawakening? So, to apply the term English Renaissance is a misnomer from one point of view. England has no right to say that we had Renaissance in the 16th century or in the early 17th century. Similarly, Germany has no right. Even the condition of France is not very good. If you leave out 2-3 philosophers, Abelard and all, then what France had before 15th century, how can it claim to be reawakening? Yes, Italy can, Italy could, Greece could. So actually, the entire Renaissance project is the project of appropriation. The entire Europe, all the countries of Europe, okay, they actually during the Renaissance period appropriated the achievements of Greece and Rome during those 200-300 years. And it was also the period when the claim that Asia had on the achievements of Greece and Rome were taken away by the Europeans. Those of you who have studied ancient world history, I would request you to read this portion of Greek civilization again, and especially with maps. Okay, so check all those maps of Greek islands where most of the philosophers, Greek philosophers and poets had lived or spent a major portion of time. You will realize that all those islands are close to Turkey. Even the famous island Lesbos, okay, from where Sappho came, was also close to Turkey. Turkey has been the part of Asia. Even in pre-Christian era, most of the political interactions that Greek had, it was with Asia, with Persia, with Turkey and other countries. In those days, Greece had very little to do with the rest of the country of Europe. I'm talking about the pre-Christian era. So they had better connection with us. There was greater intellectual, give and take between Asian countries and the Greek world. All these things were appropriated by the European scholar or the Renaissance humanists in those, 15th, 16th, and early 17th century. So just leave out here. Take another example. We talk about English Renaissance drama. English Renaissance drama. Here, oh, I have forgotten one more thing. I generally don't keep lecture notes, so this problem happens. Of late, there has been a problem with the term Renaissance itself. One of the problems I have already outlined, that the reawakening was not possible evenly in all the European countries. The second problem was that this project of Renaissance had certain prejudices. What was the prejudice? The prejudice was that it was Christianity-centric. In the center of entire project was Christianity. So non-Christians were left out. It was Eurocentric, and it has also been said that it was male-centric. So the entire, women class, was left out. So because of these objections, people have started calling it the early modern period. The early modern period. Now, this term is neutral. It does not require a kind of reawakening as Renaissance does. So, current books which deal with this period of literature in English, it maintains the term the early modern period. Then why most of the early texts on the history of English literature use this term, the Renaissance drama? I feel that in the 19th century, some of the histories of English literature were written by the French scholars. And even in the 20th century, the most famous history of English literature has been by Leguy and Kazamian. And they had their own perspective. They had, pan-European perspective, and that's why, they use the term Renaissance uniformly for all the major countries of Europe, especially Spain, England, France, and Germany. But it was problematic. Anyway. Now, in Italy, we should remember two persons who, started this movement. And the one person is very important. We all know teach him, that is Petrarch. Petrarch, who is known as the inventor, or rather as the greatest writer of sonnet. And it is from whom that we borrowed sonnet in English literature, was a devout Christian. He was a devout Christian. And he was very unhappy with the way that the fathers and scholars in the monasteries, they were dealing with Christianity and philosophy. He found that in the entire so-called medieval period, the monastery scholars were busy in abstruse kind of reasoning, very abstract kind of reasoning, which was taking the Christianity away from the common man. So he wanted Christianity to be a matter of actual daily practice, and in making this happen, he wanted that the scholars should play some role and the churchmen also should do something in this direction. So he actually established a group of civic humanists who all tried to achieve the goal that Petrarch had set. But Petrarch wanted Christianity to be a matter of daily affair for all the believers in Christianity. But later on, his followers, started modifying the goals set by Petrarch, and they, included in it the idea of personal achievement, personal glory. And this finally led to the spirit of exploration that we find in Renaissance drama. Entire Renaissance activities. And the other stream focused on scholarly activities. Now, Petrarch also believed that in order to make Christianity reach the common people in their day-to-day affair, literature could play a major role. So he started the study of classics and learned something from it, and also he set a goal as to how to use the old classics for the purpose that he had set for himself, and this new civic humanism. So later on what happens, that this civic humanism takes two directions. One, personal achievement and glory, and other, discovery of the ancient texts and classics. But remember, for Petrarch, ancient classics meant Roman classics. He did not go beyond that. Now, after that, what happens, that in 1453, Constantinople was overtaken by the Muslims, and all the Christian scholars who were settled there, they left that place, fled that place, and went in all directions of Europe. They contributed immensely in the discovery of the ancient Greek literature and philosophy. And here, the role of Arab scholars was really very immense, because without them, this would not have been possible. Now, somehow, this matter brings us to English literature. What happens in English literature? We have already discussed, we have already seen that for England, it was actually no reawakening, no Renaissance. But the spirit of Renaissance did reach England. So if we use, so if we use the term like English Renaissance, we do not mean that England and English culture was rising again. No, it simply means that the spirit of Renaissance, had reached England, and the English authors English intellectuals had started reacting to that. Now, you see, when the Renaissance began, they questioned the activity and the goal and the purpose of Christian fathers, the way they were carrying religious as well as scholarly activities. Now, when this reaches the mainland of Europe, England, here a similar kind of questioning starts. And the greatest example you can have in Francis Bacon. But before I come to Bacon, I'll go back to the term epistemology. The word is new epistemology. So let's understand epistemology first. Now, if you see the word in a dictionary, you will find a simple definition that it is a theory of knowledge. It is a theory of knowledge. Now, this simple one-line definition of epistemology does not tell us much. Okay. Well, a regular student of philosophy can know a lot, can understand a lot, but for us, it needs a little bit of elaboration. The word epistemology comes from episteme, which means knowledge, but actually what it means in practical intellectual activities, epistemology means how can we have valid knowledge? What are the means at hand of having valid knowledge? That is, in simple terms, means of knowledge. Means of knowledge. In ancient times, Aristotle had devised a method which is called syllogism. It is called syllogism, Aristotle's logic. Okay, like Socrates is mortal, man is mortal, therefore Socrates is a man. Okay, 3 stages. Socrates is the man, man is mortal, and therefore Socrates is man. But this was a very simplistic kind of reasoning which Aristotle had provided. It was made complex later on, but yet it did not yield knowledge which could be of any use, except for scholastic discussion and debate. In the early 17th century, okay, Francis Bacon took up this issue, and this incident is important. Francis Bacon felt that science had not progressed much because of bad method that the people followed or employed in unearthing new knowledge and discovering new knowledge. So the method of inquiry needs drastic change. It needs to be reviewed, and some new models need to be offered. So he criticized severely Aristotle's syllogism, Aristotle's logic, as it had been followed and modified and refined by the scholastic philosophers, and he proposed a new tool which was later on picked up by the scientists, and the method more or less is still followed by modern students of science. Okay, and it became the pillar stone of the assumptions of the Royal Society, which was set up in the middle of the 17th century. So he wrote a book, Novum Organum. Novum Organum, which means new logic or new tool of knowledge. Now, what was this new tool of knowledge? He proposed a method which was absolutely new. Okay. That method was inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is that you study a few instances deeply, you study, you analyze a certain number of data, and the conclusion thereafter is extended to the entire universe. Okay, this is inductive method. So I call it from some to all or from some to many. That is inductive. When you reverse the process from many to one or from all to one, it becomes deductive. So the method that he proposed was inductive method. Okay, and this method was picked up immediately by the scientists, and it is still in practice, though in a much modified form. In that discussion, Francis Bacon also talked about the false notions that we have. False notions that we have, a kind of feeling that we know. In reality, we don't. So a kind of illusion is created for the knower, for the subject who is trying to learn something, who is trying to know something. And he calls these illusions idols, I-D-O-L-S. And he proposes 4 idols, or he rather classifies all the possibilities in which a person believes an illusion to be a real knowledge. Okay, so he categorizes all such situations as under 4 classes, and he names very aptly as if he is dealing with some kind of mythological description. He calls it the idols of tribe. First, the idols of tribe. It is tendency to treat human observation and reason as infallible. Okay, we all have such tendency that individually we observe something, and without examining it further, we believe it to be final. Francis Bacon warned that this may not be true always. Okay, so you observe personally. Okay, so gathering empirical data is fine, but as soon as you have experienced something and you start believing that it is the final conclusion that you have reached, is not good. Okay, so he says, he called it a kind of folly. Okay, a false notion. Idols of tribe. Second one, the idols of cave. It is tendency to treat our own ideas, truths, as objective and final. Again, most of us believe कि मैं जो जानता हूँ यही सही है. So most of our discussion in the classroom, in the canteen with our friends are because each of us, okay, is convinced that what I believe is true, what I believe is final, is the ultimate truth. So this is also a kind of tendency which must be done away with. The third he calls the idols of marketplace. The idols of marketplace. It is false knowledge as a result of debasement of words and their misuse. Sometimes what happens, that certain words are used so repeatedly and in such a diverse sense that these words lose their meaning, that the words become amorphous. It carries no meaning. Okay, like in modern day, the word like paradigm, the word like structure. Okay, these words have lost their meaning because of overuse. So again, a person who wants to have true knowledge should be conscious of such debased words. And finally, the idols of the theater. It is belief in dogmas or systems of philosophy that distort reality. So every individual, if you are holding an opinion, most of us believe in certain system of thought, which is fixed, which is dogma. Okay. So in this class, okay, you can put all our religious belief, let's say, or belief in certain ideology like Marxism or Gandhism or any ism, because that ism is a fixed set of ideas. But he wants us that in all these cases, there is a possibility that you might be trapped, or you might be considering your illusion to be the real knowledge, to be the actual knowledge. So here, Francis Bacon proposes new epistemology. New epistemology. I do not know with what thinking the Department of English, Karim City College, has used this term, the Renaissance and the new epistemology. But in my belief, it is this new epistemology which is a crucial aspect of it. But the matter is not limited to it. Okay, that the epistemology proposed by Bacon is the epistemology to read, to understand, and to interpret Elizabethan and Jacobean drama. Not like that. I have already said that epistemology means means of knowledge, means of valid knowledge. Now the word means also includes tools. Now, and tools also refer to models. You take modern instances. In the 20th century, especially the second half of the 20th century, a number of literary models have been proposed. Whether it is structuralism, post-structuralism, okay, or post-colonial point of view, or deconstruction, they all are literary models. And if you look at a particular play written in the 16th or 17th century, the play yields new knowledge. You are able to see a new interpretation of the same play. Now, how does it happen? It happens because of new means of knowledge, new tools of knowledge that you are applying, new models of knowledge. So under new epistemology, I don't include the epistemology proposed by Bacon alone, but all those later subsequent models of literary interpretations which have been developed since the Elizabethan age, whether it was developed in the 18th century or the 19th century or all the models of the 20th century, because they all have helped us to bring out new truth, new knowledge in the plays written by the Elizabethan and Jacobean dramatists. So that was Renaissance and the new epistemology. Now, yes. Let's see what happens in 16th and 17th century English intellectual life, which includes literature. The discussion so far that we have had of the different aspects of Renaissance and its new epistemology, we find that it is about new kind of learning, okay, new kind of learning, and finding a new interpretation of religion. So in a way, it is finding new religion. So new world, all the discoveries, new worlds are being discovered, and a new kind of interpretation, or rather the knowledge about the structure of the world is being discovered. So a sense of novelty is everywhere, okay, and it would be further enhanced and developed in days to come. When we look at English drama, which sorry, just a second. When we look at the English drama, then we must understand 2-3 things. That as it was the case with the Renaissance movement, similar is the case with the development of drama in English literature also. The rise of English drama, the development of English drama is more or less an autonomous development in English life, starting with the miracle and mystery plays, and then morality play and interludes, and then what we have during the Renaissance period. It was a kind of autonomous, independent development, number one. Second, in almost all cultures, whether it was Greek or India or even English, drama or the development of drama always had a very close connection with religion. Very close connection with religion. So in England also, drama starts from the church. Gradually, it moves out of the church, and as soon as it moves out of the campus of the church loses control over it, and gradually it goes in the hands of businessmen, guilds, and they know the art of earning money out of it. So art and commerce come together. Art and commerce come together, and this leads to its development, okay, till what we have in the beginning of the 16th century. Now, you see, after miracle, mystery plays and morality play, this drama could not develop. Perhaps it couldn't develop further because of 2-3 reasons. Number one, to move beyond that, it required some kind of external impetus, some kind of major change in the social and political atmosphere, and also some kind of linguistic development, some kind of linguistic enrichment of the language itself. Unfortunately, none of these factors existed. So for a century or more, or for over 2 centuries rather, the drama more or less remained in a static condition. Now, when in the 16th century, okay, we arrive at the beginning of the Elizabethan age, the situation starts changing. We have political stability, a certain degree of prosperity is growing. People are having faith, in the power, in the glory of the crown. So naturally, if there is stability around, people would look for some new kind of creative expression. There is one more thing which happens in the first half of the 16th century, which leads to the reformation of the church. We all know that Henry VIII wanted to marry by divorcing his earlier wife. But Christianity, I do not know how many of you know, that theoretically there is no scope for divorce in Christianity. I am saying theoretically. And this shows the difference between theory and practice. In theory, a marriage cannot be dissolved under Christianity. This is not possible. So till that time, all the countries of Europe, which had the majority Christians, they all were controlled by the Pope in Rome. So when Henry VIII wanted to divorce his earlier wife so that he can have a male child, he had to seek permission from the head of the church at Canterbury. But he was not having it. He was not getting permission. So here he decided to declare the Church of England independent of Roman control. Now, it was the time when all over Europe, a kind of anger was simmering against the authority of the church. And that anger was because of, corruption in the entire hierarchy of the church. Martin Luther had started a movement, and he had said that educated people don't need to go to the father of the church to know and to understand what is written in the Holy Bible. Each of them is competent enough to read, understand, and interpret the Bible. This right of each individual was denied by the church. So the atmosphere was already against the Roman control, Pope's control. Henry VIII exploited the situation. He declared its autonomy, and from there he got permission to divorce his wife and marry another lady. So that was the age when Protestantism came into fore. So here you have now a new denomination of Christianity, which is known as Protestant. Now, what links this Reformation movement with Renaissance is the right of the individual. The right of the individual. Earlier, the church did not recognize the right of a person, the right of the individual to read the Bible, to understand the Bible, to reinterpret the Bible the way he or she wants. The Protestant movement guaranteed them this right. And this was an important aspect of Renaissance. So this played a very important role in developing a scholarly atmosphere in England. Okay, how this needs to be understood. As long as a scholar, you are dictated by a certain authority about your conclusion, you cannot have any new breakthrough. You cannot make any new discovery, because there is a force behind you who is always pulling you back, which is always pulling you back. But license given by this movement, Reformation movement, gave every individual the right to read and interpret things as they want. So here, the importance of individualism, the importance of human being as a subject, as an individual, not as a class. It was always there. It was always there, but as a class, as an individual, is the important thing contributed to by the Reformation book. So, if you take all these things, okay, then what happens? That you have more or less a new conception of the cosmos or of the world. Earlier, who was in the center? God. Was at the center of all the activities of the church and the fathers, the scholars there? God. Here, man occupies the center of all human efforts. Man occupies the center of all human efforts. Second, earlier, all our efforts were directed towards the obedience of God. Now, all human efforts are directed to understand nature, to unravel the mystery of nature, to discover knowledge. So, this new epistemology, actually, the apple that Eve persuaded Adam to pluck and eat. So this apple of knowledge. Now, what happens after this new epistemology comes? Go back to the Garden of Eden. Before Adam and Eve had eaten the apple, they were dependent for all kinds of knowledge on God. So they knew what God had told them, not beyond that. Okay. So they had no knowledge, they had no curiosity. That fruit, that apple, brought to them new curiosity and new knowledge, of course, for which they had to pay, But they were ready to pay. Similarly, in the 16th, 17th century, after the Reformation movement, people started enjoying individual liberty. So now, they were not expecting church or some father dictating him what to believe, what not to believe. Okay. Now, they can have their own individual opinions, they could have their own individual views. So this played a very important role in developing what we see, what we find in the form of the Renaissance drama. Now, we all know that Elizabeth became queen in 1558, and she remained queen up to 1603. And thereafter, James becomes king, and he remains king till 1625, and thereafter Charles comes. So roughly, English Renaissance means from 1500 to 1642, sometimes 1660. But for me, it is from 1570 to 1625. That's it. Okay. Here, remember all those things that I have said. So around 1560, we have the first English drama, comedy. It is perhaps in 1560. 1560, 1550, Royster, yes. And the first English tragedy, Gorboduc, 1561. But that's not important. Let's come to university wits. The university wits, who are the university wits, is not significant. But the contribution that they made is important, it's significant. As the name applies, most of you know that all of them had come either from Oxford University or from Cambridge University. Oxford University is older and Cambridge University is younger in age. Okay. Here, by way of digression, I'll take just 30 seconds to discuss how Cambridge University came into being. Sometimes, okay, unhappy and unsavory situation can bring out good things. Once what happened, that the professors of Oxford were attacked by the local residents. Okay, so there was a war and a quarrel between them. So after that quarrel, some scholars from the Oxford, okay, they decided to leave it and set up a new university. So they set up a new university at Cambridge, and that is, you have Cambridge University. Anyway, so for the first time, some scholars who had studied at Cambridge and Oxford, they left their universities and they decided to earn their livelihood out of literary activities, writing plays or acting in plays. This is perhaps, in my view, first instance in which a number of people who were quite qualified, who could have got good jobs, secure jobs in king's courts and king's or queen's courts and or offices, they decide to earn out of livelihood. Okay. So here you have a instance like V.S. Naipaul or R.K. Narayan. Okay, they never did anything except for writing. Okay, so they were pure writers. They never did anything for their livelihood. So here they come from Oxford and Cambridge. Now here, see one thing, that in those days, in good schools, grammar schools and universities, on festival occasions or on some special occasions, classical plays were enacted. Classical plays were enacted. Now these enactments provided them both the opportunity to learn about the classical tradition of playwriting, and it also gave them the opportunity to know, to learn the intricacies of stagecraft. So these scholars who had studied at Oxford and Cambridge, they already knew about plays, at least classical traditions of plays. So when they joined the theatre, they bring with them both knowledge of classical literature, especially drama, and also the knowledge of the stage as it was there in the theory and as it was presented in a certain modified form in their schools and the universities. So when they joined this playwriting, they came not only with promise, but also with some knowledge about it. Now here, there is one more thing about the play or the drama which needs to be understood. The establishment of theatres. The establishment of theatres is also very important. The first theatre in London which was set up was the Red Lion, which was established in 1567. But it was short-lived. It was short-lived closed down. Then in 1572, there was plague all around in London, and therefore playhouses were shut down temporarily. After some times in 1755, playing activities, theatrical activities were completely banned inside the municipal area of the city of London. Now, why was it banned? There were 2-3 reasons. Number one, the possibility of plague was a very good reason. Second one was, since in those days there was no other means of entertainment, a huge number of people would throng to the playhouses, and sometimes it would become very difficult for the municipal authorities to control the crowd. So sometimes it lead to violent acts, and the municipal authorities did not want all these things to happen. So after in 1575, they completely banned it. Now this banning of the theater proved a kind of boon in disguise for the proliferation of theaters. So what happened? People used this banning technically, literally. So they started establishing theater just outside the area of the municipality or municipal corporation. Okay. Because after beyond that boundary of municipal corporation, the municipality could not do anything. So people started establishing theaters. So a number of theaters all over that boundary were established. Like the theater was established in 1576, the Curtain 1577, the Rose 1587, Swan 1595, Globe 1599, Fortune 1600, the Red Bull 1604. Shakespeare was primarily associated with the Globe Theatre, which was established in 1599, but he had association with other theatres also, like the theatre, like the Rose, etc., etc., etc. There is one more thing which also is important to be understood. At that time, the court, that is Queen's Court and later on King's Court, employed strong censorship that you could not enact a play, show a play which has not been approved by the censoring authority. So all the playwrights and all the owners of the playhouses, they always tried to have good relation with the court, with the officer, with the authority who was responsible for it, so that their business is not disturbed. So they all had set their patron, mentors in the court. Shakespeare himself, his company, that is group of people, in which Shakespeare worked or with whom Shakespeare worked, was known as the Lord Chamberlain's Men. And when Queen Elizabeth died, they declared themselves the King's Men. The King's Men. It was a way of acknowledging the authority of the court or the officer who was supervising all these activities. Similarly, when Christopher Marlowe was writing plays, he was also a part of a similar group who were known as Admiral's Men. And the company And the company was called Ellen's Company, because Ellen was the name of a person who was very tall, and he used to play all the major characters about whom, you know, Marlowe had written. So here, this was the establishment of theaters. Now, if all these theaters had not been established, then there would not have been so many playwrights. Because ultimately, since all these men depended on theater for the bread and butter, so it was very important that the theaters run well. And they really ran well. Now, the university weights, if you take all of them together, then you would see that a number of people are there, like Christopher Marlowe himself, the leader, Robert Greene, Thomas Nash, John Lilly, Thomas Lodge, George Peele. Now, all of them, they were active in different areas. Like Robert Greene, he's supposed to be the initiator of comedy in English drama, and especially the play with language and the complicated plot, how it could be created, because the complication of plot has a special importance in comedy, which Shakespeare often uses, which later playwrights also used, was devised and developed by Robert Greene a lot. John Lilly, he also wrote comedy, mostly in prose, and they all helped, in fashioning the language, in enriching the language, because enriching the language, sharpening the language is the most difficult thing that an author has to perform, especially when the language is in its initial form, in its infantile form, and the English language was at that time in its initial form. It was not the English prose of the 18th century. It was not the English language of the 19th century. If you look at the prose of the mid 16th century or late 16th century, you realize how clumsy it is. So it must have taken a huge efforts by all of these persons to do new experiments and to be successful also. Christopher Marlowe was the most important figure in the university weights, and very often he is discussed for variety of reasons. Christopher Marlowe was a very, very promising author, playwright. He was born perhaps in the same year in which Shakespeare was born, but he died in 1592 or 93, and Shakespeare died in 1660. So just at the age of 28 or 29, Christopher Marlowe died. And just, a man of 28, 29 had already written Tamburlaine, Part 1, Part 2, Dr. Faustus, The Jew of Malta, Edward II, The Massacre, and also so wonderful poetry, Hero and Leanders. Christopher Marlowe was a unique kind of talent, very unique kind of talent. Without Christopher Marlowe, we cannot imagine the personality of Shakespeare that we have before us. Generally, Christopher Marlowe is talked about for 2-3 reasons. I don't think those reasons are important, but he's discussed. The fact that he was a spy, It is, it is believed that he was a spy, and perhaps he was spying both from English side and from also the French side. And that's why he got killed. Okay, but these things are assumed. The fact that he was homosexual and the fact that he was atheist. Now here, if you look at atheism, okay, then we will be able to realize that how different that world was. That to be an atheist, to believe in atheism or not to believe in the existence of God was a crime at that time. Why crime? Why in the 16th century? Even in the early 19th century, Shelley had to be expelled. When Shelley and Godwin together wrote a pamphlet, The Necessity of Atheism, he had to be expelled. He was asked to withdraw the pamphlet and seek apology. They refused and they were expelled. So how intolerant society that was, okay, is evident from this example. So the fact that he was an atheist, okay, was a big thing at that time. And the fact that his homosexuality is talked about also shows how rigid people's belief in or people's idea about sexuality was at that time. Okay. So in our age, the credit goes to Michel Foucault and others that we are in a liberated world. So homosexuality is not an issue, okay, for us today. But anyway, here, in order to understand the significance of Christopher Marlowe and the plays he wrote, okay, keep in your mind the important spirits of the idea of Renaissance. And these three things, the fact that he was a spy, the fact that he was homosexual, and the fact that he was atheist. You would see that all these three things are the marks, are the features of a rebel. Christopher Marlowe was well educated, so he could have accepted a more respected job. But in that case, he would have to be fit into the set pattern of social life. But he did not want to be fit into that set pattern. Okay. And the fact that he decided to be a full-time writer, except for his activity as spy, it also shows his rebellious nature. The fact that perhaps he was a homosexual also shows his tendency to keep himself apart, to be different from others in the society, not to be part of the social crowd. And atheism, the biggest crime, the greatest sin that could have happened at that time, that he did not believe in any religion. So with this rebellious outlook, he starts writing poetry. And he writes about home. He writes about Tamerlane. Now, Tamerlane was not a very ideal king. Okay, he was not a very ideal king. He was a great warrior. He was a great warrior, a ruthless warrior. Okay. At that time, warrior meant ruthlessness. Okay. So it was not possible that you will be kind, gentle, and human, and warrior also. It was not possible. Okay. So if you were a warrior, you would be ruthless. If you were a successful warrior, you would be ruthless. So he was ruthless. and he butchered thousands of men and women, okay, quite mercilessly. But he succeeded. He registered success. He registered victories, one after another. And he established his empire on a vast land. So this unconventional way of expanding the empire, ignoring the question of vice and virtue, attracted Christopher Marlowe. And he becomes the hero. He becomes the hero of Foster's Place. Now, can you imagine that such a character could have been the hero of an English play in any other age, in any previous age? It was simply impossible. And if it became possible, then the only reason was that the spirit of Renaissance, the spirit of free thinking, the spirit of conceiving freely new ideas had arrived in England, and it was gradually becoming acceptable. So the point to be noted here is that it is not the courage of the playwright that he wrote this play. What speaks volumes about the age and the impact of Renaissance on England is that these plays were usually successful also. Now you see, who were the audience? All those audiences, all the people who thronged to the theaters, they all were Christians. They all were Christians. But they loved the plays, they liked the plays. Okay. For them, the message or what the play contained in the form of key ideas, I do not know whether they were important or not. What was important for them were two things. Number one, the entertainment, the engagement that the play provided, and second, the novelty that the play had, something new. Okay, and T.S. Eliot therefore says, novelty is better than repetition. Novelty is better than repetition. So he was not repeating the same biblical stories again and again. He had an absolutely fresh idea of a tragic hero. Now here you see, this idea of tragic hero is so different from the conception of tragic hero in Greece. Because in Greek tragedy, all tragic heroes are noble persons. When I say noble persons, I mean it in both senses. Number one, the fact that they belong to a certain class, and second, the fact that they have a certain character that is noble character, that is nobility of character. Here, Tamerlane has neither. He belongs to a noble class, nor does he have noble character. Yet, he is successful. He is murderous. He is cruel. He behaves like a butcher, and yet he is successful. And Marlowe celebrates that success. So, no, means is not important. Ends is important. So here, perhaps, Machiavelli's, the prince would play a role. Machiavelli's prince would play a role, because Machiavelli did not believe in virtuous way of achieving the ends, which Gandhiji believed in. Okay, for Gandhiji, ends was important, means was important. Okay. Or more important, he wanted to achieve an end. But that end has to be or had to be achieved through noble means. Machiavelli did not make such prescriptions. He did not make such counsels. He believed that a goal has to be set and that goal has to be achieved by hook or by crook. So, after Tamerlane, you see Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus, it also represents the typical Renaissance spirit that we can have. One of the important features of Renaissance is the indomitable spirit of knowledge, indomitable quest for knowledge. And that quest is so strong, so intense, that the person, that the knower, is ready to sacrifice anything. He is ready to sacrifice anything. So here you see in Dr. Faustus, he deals with Satan. He deals with Satan or satanic force. Satanic force. Fine. Now here, in a conservative Christian society, people would not be expected to be dealing with such elements. Okay. Adam and Eve, or rather Eve once did some kind of dealing with Satan and its agent, the serpent. Thereafter, or since then, people have been forbidden to have any kind of dealing from the satanic forces. And here, Faustus is dealing with Satan. If you look at closely the image, the symbolism, then it's wonderful. Now here you see, Faustus wants to have certain knowledge. What is that knowledge? In a way, forbidden knowledge. Forbidden knowledge. In Eden also, there was a body of forbidden knowledge, and that would come through the apple. So Eve had and Adam have, and we are in this world. So here again, the knowledge that Faustus is seeking, he had two choices. He had two choices. Either he would approach the Almighty God, or he would approach the Satan's agent, Mephistopheles. But he decides to approach Satan. What does it indicate? It indicates, perhaps, that he does not believe that God would allow him to have that knowledge. So the goal is to have the knowledge. And once the goal is set, he would not take into consideration who he is dealing with. So he reaches Satan and negotiates with him. Now here, the most valuable thing for a Christian is to meet God and request God to allow the soul to go back to him. But here, he sells his soul. He sells his soul. For what? For knowledge. He sells his soul for knowledge. This shows how people actually were ready to give or make sacrifices for the sake of knowledge in those days. And how people toiled for knowledge during the Renaissance period would be realized if you read the famous poem by Robert Browning, A Grammarian's Funeral. So I would urge, okay, all of you, if you have read the poem, it's fine. You can revisit that. Then you will have the kind of feeling and the kind of pain or labor the scholars in the Renaissance period. Okay. So in a way, you would say that this play entirely is an unchristian play. It is an unchristian play, secular play, or much more than secular play. Because it is not just, because secular play is something which does not have to deal with religion. This play is actually against religion, against the pronouncements, against the views, against the prescriptions of religion. So here, the person is dealing with Satan. So, Dr. Faustus and other plays, one more thing that I wish to, add, and thereafter I'll move to quickly Shakespeare and, Ben Jonson, because I'll be running out of time. One of the important contributions that Dr. Faustus makes is the refinement of blank verse. Blank verse had already been invented, remember. Christopher Marlowe was not its inventor. It had been invented. But mere invention does not make anything. Unless you refine it, you make it sophisticated, and you prove the immense possibility that it carries. So, in his plays, all the successful plays that he wrote, Dr. Faustus proved that how blank verse could be used to describe, different situations. In Dr. Faustus, when he is about to die and the devil has come to take his soul, Dr. Faustus realizes that the sacrifice that he has made, and he's so restless, and he wants to repent also, but he has no time for that. He has no time for that. And it really is a very touching scene which you all should read. So that was blank verse. Blank verse is simply, heroic lines without rhyming. If you have heroic lines, iambic pentameter, no rhyming, it's blank verse. Now, thereafter you have Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote a number of plays, but Shakespeare shows a gradual progress. If you see the kind of poetry and plays that he writes in 1590s, and then in 1610 and around 1610, then you would see how a promising author, poet, could travel a long distance and 20 years of time. If Shakespeare had died, like Marlowe, at the age of 29 or 30, nobody would have discussed Shakespeare today. He would not have been part of our lecture. But the fact we are discussing Shakespeare, it is because he went on to live another 20 years after that, or more than 20 years, 23 years. So Shakespeare continued to grow throughout his life. Now, this does not happen with all the poets, and authors. For instance, people, shed tears about John Keats and P.B. Shelley, saying if they had lived another 10, 20 years, they would have become a very different kind of poet. They could have, but it cannot be said with certainty. Why? Wordsworth went on to live till 1850, but poetically he was dead by 1810. So the last 40 years of his life was absolutely non-productive. During that period, he did not write anything which would have matched with his stature. So, you could have a long life, but there is no guarantee that you would grow as a poet. Matthew Arnold himself, all his good poetry, great poetry, belongs to the period before he joined Oxford as a professor. Thereafter, he wrote no poetry. The only other person as a poet who could be compared with Shakespeare in terms of continuous growth is W.B. Yeats. W.B. Yeats, you see, continuous growth in his life as a poet and the variety of poetry that he shows. Anyway, so here Shakespeare, you have now variety of history plays, romantic comedies, and tragedy. Shakespeare's tragedies and even comedy have attracted lots of criticism. And one thing which is said very often, and I would like to mention it here, that Shakespeare's tragedy and Greek tragedy again, one difference that you will find in between Greek tragedy on the one hand and Shakespearean tragedy on the other is in the conception of character itself. But again, there is a difference in the conception of character between Marlowe and Shakespeare. Shakespeare's characters, mostly, they are, if not 100% noble, then they belong to that class. And certain elements of nobility are there. There is no doubt about it. But in Greek tragedy, all characters used to be noble. But in Greek tragedy, the tragedy occurred because of destiny, because of fate, because of the intervention of God. Here, in Shakespeare, tragedy occurs not because of God, but because of the person himself. So what decides tragedy in Shakespeare is two things: chance and choice. Actually, choice decides your personality, who you are. So the decision that Shakespeare tragic characters take lead them to the final destruction, their fall, their death, but it is not because of any divine intervention. So here it again shows the centrality of human being, not God. People are succeeding, people are successful, or people are failure, not because of any Christian God or any God for that matter, but because of their own deeds or misdeeds. This is the Renaissance idea. So when I was saying that when we say, English Renaissance drama, we mean by Renaissance the spirit of Renaissance, not the actual reality. Shakespeare, in his comedy, he took into account the recent explorations. For instance, in The Tempest. So if the reports of Columbus and Vasco da Gama and all other persons okay, who had made sea voyages. They had not reached England. Shakespeare had not come to know about them. Then many scenes of uh, uh, Tempest would not have been written. So this shows also that how the knowledge production, the knowledge produced by new explorations, is being used or creatively used by the dramatist. Shakespeare, Renaissance has two opposite characters, and this you must understand as a student of English literature. One is the love for classicism, but at the same time, it also indicates, or it also gives you the love for individual dignity. Okay, a tendency of individual freedom is also there. So when there is a choice between the two, these people go for the second. Shakespeare did not follow classical rules. He openly mixed up tragedy and comedy, which was forbidden, which had been forbidden. He openly mixed up tragedy and comedy, and he never followed the laws of three unities. But that did not make Shakespeare's play less important. In his, comedies, he employed freely the, folk activities, the festivals related to seasons. And in the great book, Charles Barber, the festive comedy, deals with this aspect at great length. Okay. Here, I don't think I have that much time to discuss all these things. Finally, let's come to other great person, Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson is important for us for several reasons. One reason is that it answers one of the one of the questions which is asked repeatedly regarding the author of Shakespeare's plays. Who wrote Shakespeare's plays? Okay. So sometimes Francis Bacon is proposed. Sometimes people say that Christopher Marlowe himself wrote some of his plays, and there are other candidates also. But here, Ben Jonson, who was a junior contemporary of William Shakespeare. Shakespeare was born in 1564 and Ben Jonson 1572. So a gap of just 8 years. He knew he was also associated with theatre. He worked with the Playhouse. He also run publication house, and he also was giving patronage to many authors. So he knew Shakespeare well. He knew Shakespeare very well, and he has made certain comments about Shakespeare, who proves beyond doubt that Shakespeare was the actual author of Shakespeare's plays. So beyond that, we don't have to seek any proof. Now, Ben Jonson is a very important figure in English drama for a number of reasons. Number one, like Shakespeare, Ben Jonson was also a respected poet. And he was a playwright. And much more than that, he was a scholar. He was a scholar with a love for classics, with a love for classical learning. So the movement of neoclassicism actually starts with Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson. He, the play that he wrote had certain classical features because he was a classicist. Therefore, he tried to follow the classical rules, the models that the ancients had provided. His play often carried prologue, induction, and self-reflection devices, statements, elaborations. Self-reflection means a drama talks about drama itself. That is self-reflexive. The fact that his plays carried prologue, introduction, that is elaboration of the play, is what the play is about. This feature of Marlowe's plays would make us compare with George Bernard Shaw in the 20th century. But I'll come to that a little later. Ben Jonson also popularized an ancient theory of humor. He popularized an ancient theory of humor. Now, the humor is, this theory believes that human being carries 4 kinds of fluids, chemicals in a body, and depending upon the dominance of one of those fluids, our character is determined. Those liquids are flame, black bile, yellow bile, and blood. So if flame dominates, then you will be phlegmatic in your behavior. Now, a phlegmatic person is generally calm and reasonable. A person in which black bile dominates, he is anxious, desirous. Oh no, he is anxious, worried. That is, he is melancholic, like Thomas Gray. Remember, an elegy written in a country churchyard. Then yellow bile, he is excitable, impulsible, irritable. And if blood dominates your personality, you will be playful and social. He tries to have his characters according to these categories in his plays. And perhaps this is his prescription also. And now, let's come to the last point. I said that Ben Jonson had something which could be compared with George Bernard Shaw. George Bernard Shaw also used to have prefaces, long prefaces, and sometimes concluding notes also. And George Bernard Shaw had a very well-defined views of the play, of the theatre. So you can say that G.B. Shaw had a well-defined theory of drama. So he was a major dramatic critic. Ben Jonson also, he was not only a poet and a dramatist, but a major dramatic critic. So it is with him that a theoretical criticism starts. So history of literary criticism must give important place to Ben Jonson, not because he was a playwright, not just because he was a poet or he was a classical scholar, but also because he was the first person in English literature who had a very clear-cut view about drama as an art. I do not know whether Shakespeare had any conscious view of drama as an art, or even Christopher Marlowe had any conscious view of drama as an art. If it had, he did not write about it. But Ben Jonson did write about it. And now finally, I told one thing in the beginning itself that the development of drama, the rise of drama in English is an autonomous phenomenon. Well, in course of your development, in course of your intellectual growth, you are influenced little bit by this side, or from this side or that side. That happens. But more or less, this was an independent and autonomous development. The first person to realize and to express it in very clear-cut terms and celebrate it was John Dryden. In his essay, I don't remember the title, preface to an essay on dramatic poesy, yes, an essay on dramatic poesy. He celebrates this fact that Elizabethan plays, Shakespearean drama, is different from ancient drama and said superior. Elizabethan drama is different from French drama and superior. The only two traditions which could have competed with Elizabethan drama. And he says that Elizabethan drama is superior in terms of quality, in terms of the dramatic value that it carries. So this kind of celebration is very important. But here again you see that Dryden seems to be biased when he says that his age, that is the poetry and drama being written in his age, is superior to the age of Elizabeth. This is not tenable, but his two conclusions, two statements that Elizabethan plays are superior to ancient plays and Elizabethan plays are superior to French plays, actually is a great acknowledgement and great appreciation and celebration of the native tradition of drama, or rather nativization of drama, and this tradition I think continues. In the 20th century, after the A.C. Bradley's phenomena is over, people have been looking at the Renaissance drama in two ways. I'm not talking about the modern theories, but there was one issue which was raised by T.S. Eliot. He said that the great romantic Shakespeare critic Lamb, he makes a distinction saying that Shakespearean plays or the Elizabethan plays could be enjoyed even outside the theatre, assuming that literature and drama are two different things. Now, from that time onwards, this kind of separation, this kind of thought that drama and literature are not the same thing. Literature may be part of drama, but drama as a whole cannot be taken or as literature has not had a very good impact on the proper appreciation of it. But personally, I believe that in today's world, a good play must be good both in the theatre as well as in our bedroom when we are reading it, in our study room, in our library. No matter how much successful a play is in theatre, if it is not a good read, if we are not able to read and enjoy it, in our study room, then perhaps we teachers of English literature or we teachers of literature will not find much value in it. Fortunately, the plays that we have discussed today, or the drama, the Renaissance drama that we have discussed today, most of the plays are such which we can read and we can enjoy also in our study room. That's all for today. I hope. I think yes, that's all. That's over. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Das, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Naresh, sir, for your such a beautiful lecture, which had been so elaborative, so analytical, so insightful, and so captivating. Now, the forum is open for our participants or the audience to ask any question if they have in their mind. I don't find any question as of now in the chat box. If
Sir, there are two questions. There are two or three questions.
okay. Well, there is one question from Alia Naz. She says, were Christopher's works finer to that of Shakespeare? Who influenced the Renaissance most?
Pardon, can you repeat the question, sir, please?
Whether Christopher's works finer to that of Shakespeare's? Who influenced the Renaissance most?
Oh. The question is tricky and difficult to answer. Well, Christopher Marlowe had an important, significant influence on Shakespeare. And that's how Shakespeare is there with us. Without Christopher Marlowe, it is very difficult to imagine there would have been any Shakespeare. But the reverse is not true. If there had been no Shakespeare, there was always a great playwright in the form of Christopher Marlowe. You have asked who influenced Renaissance more. Okay. Second question is who is finer? Who is finer? Well, I think Shakespeare is finer because he wrote after Christopher Marlowe, but the intensity of feeling, intensity of emotion that you find in Christopher Marlowe is unique, and that uniqueness perhaps was also because Christopher Marlowe was just in his 20s. What happens in life that as we grow in age, our emotions, our impulses, get blunted. That had not happened with Christopher Marlowe. So he's very intense. He's very intense. That intensity, perhaps you don't find. But as far as fineness is concerned, Shakespeare is finer, no doubt. The second question, who influenced Renaissance more? Actually, there are two aspects of it. Both of them were influenced by Renaissance, and both of them influenced the pace of Renaissance. Fine. Christopher Marlowe, as he had intellectual background, so you could say that he was more influenced by Renaissance, and perhaps he also had the immediate impact on the next generation of dramatists. Shakespeare cannot claim that. Shakespeare cannot claim that he influenced Ben Jonson, because there is no trace of such influence. Even the tragedy writers who happened in the Jacobean age, they demonstrate greater influence of Christopher Marlowe than of Shakespeare, in my estimate. Thank you.
The last question is from Arjunas. She says, how did the theater conventions help the dramatists to give more effective drama? And the second question is, how does Elizabethan drama benefits the modern drama?
Taking your first question first, the condition of the stage has twin function. First, it works as a brake, as a checking force on the dramatist, because you have to say whatever you have to within the limitations of the stage. Okay. So that is the limiting impact. But that limiting impact results in a better artistic form, because play is not just a message that it conveys. A play has to convey a message in the art form. Form is also important. So the theatrical limitations actually help the artist, help the writer to become a better artist. So it is in that sense that theater has an important influence on the playwright. Your second question. In order to answer this question, I will refer you to the essay of T.S. Eliot, Tradition and Individual Talent. If you read that essay, then you will realize that no great poet, no great dramatist can achieve eminence or can achieve excellence unless he or she has absorbed the past tradition of that art. So if you are writing in the 21st century and you are writing in a particular tradition, whether you are writing in the Indian tradition or you are writing in Western tradition, okay. Well, in the 20th century, 21st century, all the traditions have joined together. So you are working in a tradition. You have got to have a traditional sense of tradition. So it is very important that you have absorbed the achievements of the Elizabethan theatres, achievements of the Restoration theatres, achievements of the 18th century theatres, and what happened towards the close of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. So what the writers in the past have done is for you both inspiration and as well as a kind of warning. It tells you what to do and also it tells you what not to do. Thank you.
So much, Naresh sir, for your addressing the queries of our students. We are now at the end of this event. I request our junior most colleague, Saket Kumar, to propose a vote of thanks. Saket sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Naresh, sir, for the very enlightening session. The session was very fruitful for the participants. I would say that you made the session very informative with the beautiful play of words. As you said that English Renaissance doesn't mean that it was the reawakening or the rebirth of the English ideas. But you said that it was the period when the intellectuals started discussing about the classical works and learnings in England. And the thing which I noted down was the playwrights of the era such as William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe were not intellectuals, as they wrote to entertain rather than to instruct. So thank you, sir, for the session. This was a very informative session. I would like to thank all the faculty members and the participants. We will again meet on Monday at the same time for the lecture number 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Saket, very much. And my thanks are due to all the entire Department of English, Yahya Bhai, Dasde, and Basu if she's around, and Neha if they are around. Thank you, all of you. And it's always a pleasure to receive a call from you and to say yes to your proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And thank you for rekindling my faith in Christopher Marlowe.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think the participants are leaving. Saket,
Yes, sir.
now the session is over. We
Yes,
can discuss something informally. You made a point
yes,
here
sir. Yes, sir.
while proposing a
Yes,
vote
sir.
of
Yes,
thanks
Yes, sir.
that Shakespeare was not an intellectual, not a scholar. So how could he have been
No.
influenced by Renaissance? This is very important. You see, there are different ways in which you get influenced. Okay, like all of us who know a little bit of classicism or classical ideas, none of us, okay, have read any original book written by Plato and Aristotle, except one or two, like Poetics I have read, okay, and Republic I have read, and little bit of Politics and Ethics by Aristotle I have read, and of course Horace and Longinus. Except for these writings, we have not read anything from them, but yet we know. Shakespeare had studied in a grammar school. And in those days, plays were enacted in the universities, in the grammar schools regularly on all the festive occasions. Okay, number one. Second, Shakespeare was always learning from his contemporary and senior writers. Okay, so he was not gaining anything direct from, let's say, Plato or Aristotle. He was least bothered about it. Okay, as long as he was happy to entertain the people present in the theater, it was okay for him, because he was a businessman. He was looking for profit. Okay, so Renaissance idea did come to him, okay, from his friends and colleagues, but he did not bother to